My 4-year-old stood up to my toxic mom, and I watched a cycle begin to break. You don't always realize when a cycle is breaking. Sometimes it doesn't come with fireworks or speeches or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it happens in the quiet of your kitchen, with the squeak of tricycle wheels, the sound of a fridge door clicking shut, and the clear, unwavering voice of a 4-year-old drawing a line no one ever dared draw before. I watched it happen, a moment so small it could have slipped by unnoticed. A misunderstanding, a few words exchanged, and then something shifted. Something cracked, not in a painful way, but like sunlight breaking through a stained glass window that had always been dusty. My daughter stood up for herself. She did it with grace, with calm, with clarity. She didn't shout, she didn't melt down. She simply told the truth. And for the first time in a long, long time, my mother, the same woman who raised me under 1,000 sharp words, backed down, apologized, and I stood there in stunned silence, witnessing what felt like the beginning of something new. A fracture in the legacy of silence, shame, and swallowed feelings. A beginning, a break in the chain. A little girl refusing to shrink the way her mother once did. It was just an ordinary afternoon. Nothing special, no buildup. Just one of those days where the house smells faintly like toast, and there's a thin layer of chaos hovering around the living room. Toys scattered across the carpet, a cartoon buzzing in the background. My daughter, 4 years old and full of wild, innocent energy, was riding her tricycle in slow, careful circles around the kitchen tiles. My mom was visiting. She was in the next room, close enough to hear us, far enough to not see what was happening. We have a complicated relationship, my mom and I. I love her, but there's no denying she comes with barbs. She's the kind of woman who uses volume instead of reason, who snaps before asking questions, who never quite mastered the art of softness. I grew up under her roof, her rules, her voice, her expectations. I learned early on to be small, to walk carefully around her moods, to apologize first, to bottle up the unfairness. It took me years of therapy and parenting my own child to even see the damage clearly. But that's the thing about generational trauma. It's invisible when it's your normal. That day, I was just trying to enjoy the moment. My daughter had been in her own world, humming to herself, pretending her trike was a spaceship. She made one wide turn and bump. The front wheel tapped the fridge. Not slammed, not even hard, just a tiny bump, the kind any kid might make without noticing. And from the other room came the voice. "Get out of the fridge! You know better than to leave that open!" Sharp, accusing, loud. My daughter paused. She looked over at me, confused. "I wasn't in the fridge," she called back. My mom didn't come into the room, just raised her voice again. "It sure sounded like you were. Just keep the door closed. You better stay out of there." That was it. That's all it took. I felt my stomach tighten. That familiar tension from childhood. That unfairness. That sting of being wrongly accused, of not being believed. But before I could say anything, my daughter straightened her shoulders. She looked in the direction of my mother's voice and said, calmly, firmly, "I was not in the fridge. I was trying to turn around. That was rude of you to yell at me, and you need to apologize." I froze. My daughter, barely past toddlerhood, had just spoken words I never had the courage to say. Not at her age, not at 14, not even at 24. She stood there, unapologetic, steady, not disrespectful, not emotional, just truthful. And I felt something shift inside me. For a split second, I hesitated. The old programming kicked in. That little voice from childhood that says, "Don't talk back, don't challenge her, just nod and move on." I had a moment of parental calculation. Should I intervene? Should I redirect? Should I step in and smooth it over? But then I looked at my daughter, and she wasn't angry. She wasn't being rude. She was simply standing up for herself. I realized this wasn't a teaching moment for her. This was a teaching moment for me. So I said nothing. I stayed close, ready to back her if needed, but I didn't interrupt her courage. And then, from the other room, my mom responded, her tone softer, almost unsure. I'm sorry for yelling at you. That was it. Not defensive, not dismissive, just an apology. Maybe she said it out of reflex. Maybe she didn't want to argue with a child. Or maybe, just maybe, something about being called out by a 4-year-old made her pause in a way my silence never had. I don't know, but I do know that I felt 1,000 tiny pieces of healing in that moment. Not because my mom changed, but because I did, because my daughter did, because a line that had always felt unbreakable suddenly wasn't. Afterward, we carried on like nothing happened. My daughter got back on her tricycle, humming again, undisturbed. My mom didn't bring it up, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept replaying the moment over and over in my mind. Not just what was said, but how it was said. The calm, the self-respect, the refusal to be scolded unfairly. I've spent my whole life unlearning the fear of speaking up, teaching myself that my voice matters, that I can disagree without being disloyal, that I deserve to be treated with dignity. And here was my daughter, 4 years old, living those lessons out loud. I wanted to wrap her up in my arms and say, "You are exactly who I dreamed I'd raise." Because let's be honest, kids don't always get it right. They push boundaries, they test us. But this time she wasn't testing. She was standing tall in her truth. And I let her. That might have been the most important decision I've made as a parent. Not stepping in, not diluting her courage, just letting her own that moment. Cycles don't break overnight. They crack slowly, with little voices saying big things, with quiet moments in kitchens, and kids on tricycles, and moms who choose to listen instead of silence. That day, something broke in the best way, and something else, something stronger, began to grow. My daughter won't remember every detail, but I will. I'll remember the pride in her eyes, the way she spoke with dignity, the way she knew, even at 4, that she deserved to be treated with respect. And I'll remember that for the first time, our family tree shook, and a new branch reached toward the light. Do you like stories like this? Click here to watch more.